the YouTube live stream. I am Aušra Kukelkaitė, Managing Director of Global Lithuanian Leaders Organization. Today we will be presenting and hearing and discussing about a very interesting research which has been conducted by scholars in Vytautas Magnus University and Social Innovation Institute in Lithuania about social remittances of remigrants for society's welfare growth. Well, it's very complicated, actually, title of the research, but I assure you that it's going to be very interesting, and because it's a lot what GLL is working with about how people, especially those who had left the country after the independence regain and now are actually moving there back and forth to Lithuania and out of Lithuania. So how those people are actually giving back to their society, to Lithuania. Of course, this research was not only about Lithuania. This is the reason why we are talking in English right now, so that this research is available to international audiences. So it was also conducted in Poland and Croatia, but I will not expand more on the research itself, because I believe that the scholars and research fellows who were actually doing the research will tell us much more about it. So without further ado, I would like to introduce three fellow researchers who will be presenting today the research. It's Dr. Vytis Čiubrinskas, who is a professor of social anthropology at Vytautas Magnus University in Kaunas and a visiting associate professor at the Department of Anthropology in Southern Illinois University. He was actually leading this research. So hello, Vytis. Could you please unmute yourself?
Yes, hello, good afternoon, good morning to to transatlantic people. I'm very delighted to be invited.
Vytis, before you continue, let me introduce the other researchers. It's Dr. Ingrida Janulionė, who is the director of Social Innovation Institute and lecturer at Vilnius University, and she was also a fellow researcher in this research, and also Dr. Laima Nevinskaitė, who is a researcher at Social Innovation Institute and an associate professor at Vilnius University. Hello, Ingrida. Can you say hi? And hello, Laima. Can you say hi to everyone?
Yeah, labas vakaras.
Hi. So without further ado, I would like you, Vytis, to tell us a little bit about what this research is about. And you can actually mainly start from what is social remittance, what is the remigrants, and what is actually welfare growth, because I could see that online it actually raised a lot of discussion, so those terms. So could you please translate it into a human language?
Okay, so thank you again for inviting to join such a nice event, and thank you a lot for your organization of that, you, Aušra, and your team. So it's really nice to have such a great audience today and to tell a bit on project. Project actually has a very complicated title, that's for sure. It's social remittances of remigrants for the society welfare grow, challenges and experiences in comparative perspective. 3 countries taken into consideration. So it's a project is actually very much under research perspective of migration studies, focusing on social remittances of high-skilled immigrants into 3 post-socialist countries Lithuania, Poland, and Croatia, and it comes in comparative perspective and focuses on mainly on first generation on voluntary migration, not on forced, not on those migrants who came over during Valdas Adamkus presidency times after 1990s. So it is assumed that high-skilled migrants, high-skilled immigrants staying abroad, they are accumulating some sort of experience, human capital. They adopt civic norms, values, practices prevailing in deep-rooted democracies. So those kind of things are sort of resourcefulness, and return of those people are equipped with knowledge, initiatives, values, attitudes, experiences, and so on. And those we call social remittances. To compare with financial or material remittances, those are very much focused on soft power we're getting from deep-rooted democracies. Focus of the project is on experiences and challenges of transfer of social remittances and on potential impact on society's welfare growth. Potential impact. And we studied forms, we studied ways, we studied challenges which prevent acquiring, transferring, and implementing of those social remittances. So the aim was mainly to focus on impact by identifying actors, identifying practices. I mean, individuals, organizations, also practices of transfer in everyday lives, very much of population. And Lithuania, Poland, and Croatia are taken into account because the project is comparative on 3 countries. Second point is role played in social remitting by such factors as return motivation, identity, agency, integration practices. Third point would be role of receiving local environment, levels of social resistance to impact. Next would be social remittances as social investment, facilitating change in business, work culture, and how it looks or goes like innovation. And the last would be identifying the role of media, and social media related to mobilization, transfer, and implementation of remittances. Research is involved in the project. We see already 4 of us here to present right now, and we have another 3 which are not seen on the screen. It's first of all Dr. Karolina Hornstein-Tomic. She's a scientific advisor at the Institute of Social Sciences at Ivo Pilar Institute in Zagreb, Croatia. Also, Dr. Marta Buller, she is a researcher at Social Research University in Warsaw, and also Ingrida Lukosienė, she is a researcher at Vytautas Magnus University Center for Social Anthropology. Methodology used for the project is, of course, qualitative, we did, and it includes semi-structured in-depth interviews, focus groups. A very important perspective is given by matched interviews, which are from friends, colleagues, and members of the family of returnees. We got in-depth interviews from members of organizations, and also discourse analysis of Lithuanian media and issues of migration. So total, it's about 90 interviews we got, and 3 focus groups we made. So all that would be published with the results. We're expecting to be published in the book, which already has a title, Returning, Remitting, Receiving. And we have on negotiation, or actually we have a contract already. We have a Lit Verlag, it's a publishing place in Zurich and Berlin. This book will be kind of evaluation, or not evaluation, it's summing up of all the project. And we have a number of articles already. One is printed by, published in the Journal of Baltic Region, written by Gečenė Janulionienė, and also other articles already on the way to be printed, and one is under review by Violeta Parutis in the Journal of Population, Space and Place. And also we have had 3 international conferences already with presentations of our project results. One was in Croatia, next was in Sweden, and the last one was in the United States. So sort of results are on the way to be more and more shared.
So thank you, Vytis, and let's dive into the content, okay? Because I think that everyone is like very curious and to hear what the insights are from the research. And today, of course, as you said, the research is way broader, but today we're gonna touch 3 topics, which is moral economy and ambition of remigrants. Also, we're gonna be talking about the civil and political contribution. And the third topic is the influence of social media. And afterwards, myself, I'm very interested to have a discussion like how we could use those insights from the research to move them into action already. So that's going to be a second part of the event. So let's move to the presentation of the content. Vytis, your part was about social remittances as moral economy, ambition for betterment and identity.
Right, thank you very much again. So my focus is on moral economy and ambition for innovation and change, and also answer to that, acknowledgement of. So my point would be that transnational understanding of migration is very much focused on value interjections. We have to figure out that migrants are always in multiple exchanges with those who are non-migrants. So these exchanges must not be reduced to material or financial remittances only, but this can and not to a rational calculation. Value interjections means reciprocation. It means answer of mobility to immobility. So mobile people and immobile people are in constant relationship, and it's a constant value implied relationship. So in this way, moral responsibility of migrants, first of all, is of course comes to immediate families, to relatives, and in homeland. It's very much we can see as, and we would like to prove it as a one significant point too. But generally speaking, I would like to prove that migrants are transmitting a kind of soft power as the resources accumulated abroad as intellectual and social capital, and confidence in themselves to act upon returning the country of origin as agents of change, agents of innovation, agents of advancement. Through transfer of social remittances, they of course seek reaffirmation. They seek their statuses, they seek their identities to be reaffirmed. How all that happens? I have 3 cases: moral economy, how it works in private and public spheres. Second case would be how remigrant ambition comes into agency. And the third, how acknowledgement or recognition of all that impact is made. So first, moral economy in private sphere. As I already told, it very much focuses on primordial ties or on patrimonial ties. It's very much emotional closeness related. It's kept via transnational family structures and via trust-based networks. And social remittances are transferred as a care, as courtesy, as display of attention to the immediate family, providing emotional comfort, lowering levels of stress and anxiety, improving work-life balance, taking advantage of better maternity conditions in the home country, etc. So social remittances in private sector can be also function as moral and educational imperatives when remigrants become agents of honesty to their non-migrant family members, for example, telling grandma not to bribe doctors, asking for paychecks in any place you are buying something, providing encouragement to young generation, investing to invest on yourselves. I quote, one informant said, "I saw in America that you have to learn until you are young. The time is going, clock is dropping, and you have to invest in your own experience, language, learning, and so on." So after return, he was always urging his youngers in the family and kin to invest in yourself by learning languages, it's quoting. He also was categorical urging for not smuggling cars from Russia by trafficking those through the state borders with Russia, with Kaliningrad. So what's in public sector? In public sector, moral economy works as, quote, we had a conversation with my friend once that if you still want to take you need to stay abroad, but then you feel that you want to give, then you can go back to Lithuania. So it's a kind of conversation from overseas. And what's next? Then you want to give, what you want to give. And want to give in public sector very much comes with a tolerance, liberal values, sensitivities to humiliation towards race, sexual orientation, immigrants, so on. And it is very much acknowledged by non-migrants, in particular that those return migrants bringing politeness, positivity, warmer relations with co-workers, respect for employees, and making shorter distance. So in that sense, in a work culture or a business ethic ways, you can find a lot of remitting. In what sense? Remitting of Western standards, transparency, incorruptibility, intolerance to hierarchy, clientelism, intolerance to red tape bureaucracy, procrastination, imitation of work. That is, a lot of my informants used to say, we need to spend money, non-migrants say to us, please come and help. So this is the way Remigrant is stopping it. Next point would be agency. Agency, how agency works. First point, agency is very much based on self-confidence, which comes along with human capital accumulated abroad. Self-confidence, let me quote, the most important experience I brought from abroad is self-confidence. I would rather be worried to do many things, if not America experiences. It's one quote. Another quote says, in America, you yourself have to defend degree, to find a job, to start a company, to employ others. These are questions of your own initiative. If you are not taking initiative, that's all. So this is why so much important to put initiative, and America teaches that. So this is a sort of resourcefulness comes from, and it comes into ambition to start something, to start new, and on my own, new business, new organization, new life, equipped with transparency, fairness, Western work ethics, work culture. So all that comes. And also, if to talk about ambition to act for innovation, from many interviews, you can get words like want to do more, better, make a change. So how, what? It's not the same as it was during 90s when many from diaspora came and they re-established Vytautas Magnus University. They worked for President Adamkus' office, and it was really giving back to rebuild country after communism, devastated by communism. Our immigrants are coming, wanting to do more, better. They have an ambition, but ambition is not necessary with end result. This ambition is to make sense, as it comes from Indra Lukosheni research, to make sense, to make order in a situation by rationalizing it. For example, at work, you can do it life-work balance better to compare with what was in migration. It's better here. So, and what next? Ambition comes also using themselves as role model. Role model, the migrant himself or herself is ready to lead by example. Quote, by your own behavior, you do inspire others. You do inspire others by following the principle of no imitation of work, just doing, end of quote. So we have also more here, more of that fight, if you like. Some are doing like ambition to make sense, ambition to make some sort of fighting with indifference and incompetence. And energy to fight for is not just that. It's if you are stopped like saying, quote, fighting with indifference and competence by taking initiatives, and it looks like that you are bringing attitude that you are original. But generally it is not, but it is an energy to fight for transparency, justice, equal rights, including women and disabled, for example, and it comes from matched interviews. So re-migrants are seen like that in many ways. They are seen like fighters, they're seen like agents of honesty, they're seen as teaching others, to helping non-migrants, for example, to write a CV or to job interview. The last point is on reaffirmation of migrant status and the challenges on that. So there are two ways of affirmation or acknowledgement of social remittances brought by re-migrants. First is, of course, negative. Re-migrants not given any acknowledgement. Sometimes they are even, their response is, quote, migration comes as a journey up in status, while a return is in status, while return is when your status gets swinging. That means status becomes ambivalent, and it could be related to non-migrant dividing returnees into those who returned due to failure, and others, the non-migrants, come to you and expect you to be an expat, becoming a compat. So two ways of approaching. So it's a lot of uncertainty, and many migrants would agree with, re-migrants would agree with another quote. They drag you down because your self-esteem requires you to want to do more, better, and all to do this way for the good of enterprise. It appears it's not needed. It appears you are regressing. So this is quote, end of quote. And how we can get with that? It's a quote from Parutis and Buller, another migration back to the host country. So the migrants are turning around and leaving. In another way, it's a lot of that acknowledgement comes from personal value. Re-migrants feel like donors. They are given, by donating, you are given confidence. And for example, by founding organizations. One did establish a center for microbiology. Another did establish an institution for autist children. Others do for SOS children, Niekieno Vaikai, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. A lot of organizations are, Remigrants are joining or establishing, and they are getting a lot of confidence through this and acknowledgement through this. Another way to get acknowledgement or affirmation is getting satisfaction through bridging bridges, because most of Remigrants are with relations, most of Remigrants are with contacts, most of Remigrants are very much acting as intermediators. Quote, she knows who is who in America. And we don't need to shoot in the sky by looking for everything we need. She can answer to you, yes, I know one person, can do find her contact for you. So it's small, but it's important for match interviews again. So Remigrants are firmly, their self-satisfaction is firmly resting in themselves. So they do, they feel they do right, they feel they do orderly steps, and it is making sense. And they are getting acknowledgement from some, for example, from co-workers, from colleagues, from patients, from people in a need, from family, and so on. So social remittances are also related to identity, how identity is asserted, reaffirmed. First of all, it comes with through the involvement in again in organizations, in patriotic organizations like Šiaulių Sąjunga or National Guards, in different educational organizations, cultural projects, and part of Remigrants are continuing their engagement as it was in diaspora places. Others do very much enacting responsibility in terms of they feel a mission to found organizations promoting homecoming, like Sugrįžus or Važiuokit Namo, and other organizations have been founded by return migrants. So such agency is probably quite of unique for Lithuania, because in Poland and Croatia, we don't have those examples. To conclude, sorry for taking time. So it's my point would be that experience of migration makes new confidence. It entails agency, and it is not necessarily the result. It's soft power of donor, soft power of bridger, and active participation in civic society promoting in organizations, in projects, gives self-satisfaction, and the reaffirmation of national identity comes vis-a-vis multiple positionalities shaped between transnational and cosmopolitan frameworks of belonging or double belonging, like recent initiative to have a referendum of double citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you, Vytas. It's very, actually, you could write a book only on this topic, I think. And we will have the opportunity to maybe ask questions later. I think that the main question remains from what you actually presented. My question remains is how to not make a gap between people who are living here and people who are remigrants, right? So that they feel as a team, but not as better or worse. But this is a theoretical question, rhetorical question. So let's move to our second researcher. It's Ingrida Gečienė-Janulionė. Hello, Ingrida. And she will present her part. That is the research about civic and political contribution of return migrants. That is a very interesting topic, especially when we are talking about the voting and dual citizenship and so on. So the floor is yours, Ingrida.
Okay, thank you. So I will present just a part of social remittances. We call it political remittances. And it's defined as an act of transferring political principles, vocabulary, and practices between two or more places. So authors, they distinguish such forms of political remittances. Voting, as said Aušra, remitting political values, practices, identities, or simply being active in various forms in lending support to a politician, party, or movement back or home. And some authors, they say that and make a link political remittances with ideas about democracy and practices of political advocacy, or with democratic diffusion of attitudes and behaviors absorbed in democratic host countries. However, other authors, they remind us that sometimes political remittances can contribute also to escalation of conflicts, violence, and security challenges in countries of origin, and some resistance movements, terrorism and criminal activities, etc. So it was quite interesting to look what our informants saying about political remittances in Lithuania and other countries. And actually from our interviews, it became clear that not all of migrants, they have this, how to say, wish to deliver with political remittances. However, part of them, they are really very engaged and in such a forms of political remittances as they joined political parties in Lithuania, became advisors of president and other politicians or institutions. They are involved in institutional development, represent global Lithuanian organizations, or create their own non-governmental organizations, as Vitis already mentioned. Or maybe just participate as volunteers in other NGOs and civic initiatives. So if to quote one of our informants, he said that it all started with a Facebook group, but later I built an organization and then to that way, and it directed me to great ambition, ignited to desire to participate in politics in parallel with that organization. And this year I will try to participate in the same as elections, to try to change the bureaucracy there, because there are a lot of problems. And another informant, he described that he became the public consultant to president. Also, he created 2 more non-governmental organizations. So we see that some of our migrants, they have this activity, wish for this activity. It depends very much on their own characteristics, their own personalities, and also with their own practice in a previous country, in the host country. However, there is no clear path, because some of they have this experience of being members of non-governmental institutions abroad, but some of them, they became very active only after return to home country. And I would also want to present some other informal political and civic engagement in public sphere, just as being organizers of debates for the candidates for Seimas, for example, or also helped Lithuanian embassies to hold mirror debate and to organize all of the meetings. And also we are involved in writing, publishing articles in the Lithuanian media and press, in Diaspora media. And as one of our informants said, we are still involved in politics, even though we are an apolitical organization. All members may have different views, but we are involved in politics by speaking on very important issues. However, more often, migrants were engaged in political transformative acts in private sphere by sharing new values, activating their relatives, colleagues, and friends to participate in voting, involving them in political discussions, and involving in various civic activities, activizing their social circle. As one of informants said, first of all, the attitude in family towards homosexual people has changed, because I lived in England and Britain, which is a very free city. Attitudes toward people of other races have also changed in her family. Now we are talking about it in a very modern way. Another informant was saying other aspects of this value transmission. I teach them tolerate for both each other in the family and tolerance for each other. We have had a lot of discussions about refugees. My parents had one opinion, and I am more in favor of their refugees' position. I need to help. We need to help. We need to cooperate. So we see that they trying to make change in very micro level, but it changes step by step, one family by other family, and this field of values and this democratization orientation is going further. And also they have some impact on, as I said, strengthening this wish to vote. As one of our informants said, I think a lot of people have had experience that their loved ones then go and ask, where do you need to vote here? And so on. And you try to explain how to choose what to vote for, according to your personal choice, according to the political program, where the politicians keep their promises, not according that someone said. So also in this direction, we can see the impact of these political remittances. And also it was interesting to understand what is motivation for remitting in political sphere and civic sphere. And here we have such a nice answer that I always had the heritage for my country and I wanted to change things for the better. Or another informant, now I feel responsible for these people. I don't see another scenario anymore. I am just part of it and I like it. And this reminds us that this motivation sometimes by researchers are called, for example, Kuznetsov, as intrinsic motivation. like a desire to be a part of larger national project, to get involved in activities in the country of origin and to change it for better. So this moral imperative that was mentioned already by Vitis also have this impact here for remitting of political remittances. And also we can see that sometimes migrants face quite strong resistance toward the values that they brought from the host countries. As one of the informants said, I came much more open and Lithuanians are much more conservative. I don't try to specifically intimidate them with my thinking, but I speak openly and people try to understand me. They get interested. As another informant, he said about the conversation with some person, he said, we started to talk about dual citizenship. He was specifically against and very strongly. So we started with him for a few hours and he changed his mind. My arguments made him think. I felt like I was doing a very hard job. So we see that from this micro perspective, despite that returnees face huge resistance toward the political and civic values, but in many cases we succeed to make big or small, but not less important changes in the country of origin. So,
thank you, Ingrid. It's actually amazing because I remember in summer we were talking to one of the, he's president of one of the clubs of professionals in Denmark, and he was saying we have to he was talking about the same-sex marriage and partnership thing, and he says we have to make some campaign that people from abroad they have to kind of convince at least one or two persons in their surrounding about that and kind of educate more about this issue. And your actually research proves that it's actually working, and maybe this value transition, this point of to life and to world could be transmitted even faster just through sharing your points of perspective. So thank you, Ingrida, very much. And we will be heading further to our next topic presented by Dr. Laima Nevinskaitė. And she's actually going to be talking like very logical next steps. So how do we encourage people to return, and how media and social media has effect on returning and return migration?
Thank you. Yeah, so I will present, as Sausha said, some ideas, some observations on my from my research on representation of return migration and social remittance on the media, so to say mainstream media, mass media, and also immigrant social media. And I will talk about their possible role in encouraging return migration. So my presentation will be sort of two parts, because media and social media are pretty different in this respect. First of all, why to study media? Why to study representation of immigrants in the media? It is ongoing concern since the beginning of immigration in Lithuania and study of immigration that negative representation of immigrants in the media makes immigrants feel unwelcome in their home country, and in this way does not encourage return or does not encourage maintaining of ties participation in the life of the country. So I studied media in this view, and my research was qualitative, as the whole project, and I analyzed 2 news sites, Delphi LT and 15 Minučių LT, and the period included 1 year from the middle of 2019, more or less up to now, every second month. Earlier research, for example, from 2012 or 14, I also did a study on that, on similar topic, typically showed that media was little interested in return migration and was more often presenting successful cases of high-skilled return migration. In my present research, I found quite many stories on successful cases of return, including a wider range of backgrounds of successful stories, of successful remigration cases, not only high-skilled. So although I didn't make a direct comparison with earlier studies, I nevertheless can claim that the image of return migration is at least supplemented by many successful cases of return and social remittances, and not only of high-skilled migrants. So what kind of stories are these? They tell, for example, about single people or couples or even friends who upon return get a good job in Lithuania or establish their own business or find some other pleasing activity. Regarding social remittances, these stories mostly mention the experiences of remigrants, personal experiences that they use in their own jobs. But occasionally, a part of the stories mention transfer of these remittances of this experience to others, or use of this experience that brings benefit to others. So most often, the stories tell about social remittances in business, although there were stories related to enactment or transfer of social and cultural values. So like civil contributions, what Ingrida was telling about, when immigrants brought idea of communal living that they saw in Norway, for example, and they're trying to somehow enact to use this experience in Lithuania. By telling these successful stories of returning immigrants, the messages indirectly or sometimes explicitly construct a message that it is possible to live in Lithuania too. And I will show, I very briefly will show, can you see my screen?
No.
No, I don't know why it didn't work. Okay. So I'm coming simply back, I guess. So for example, some explicit stories like a couple of immigrants establishing their own business on Šakočiai, and the title of the article says, a couple establishing a business and sending image to the immigrants. It is possible to live in Lithuania too. So as said, sometimes you can even read this message. An important observation is that considerable part of these stories are from the province, not only from Vilnius, from the capital city. And they construct, thus they create additional message that it's possible to live not only in Lithuania, but in the province too. And we could discuss later why these stories, why do we have a lot of these stories later in the discussion if someone is interested. Some of these stories emphasize the sense of belonging and attachment, which motivates return and social remittance and wish to contribute to the development of the country. For example, people telling, I always knew that they want to come back. I deeply care about the future Lithuania, and also mentioning what Vytis was telling in his presentation, this moral obligation that I know that I have to bring back something because I have gotten something in Lithuania when I was living here. And one more observation, because when you do discourse analysis, it's important not only ask what you see in the messages, but also what is not there. So what I saw that these stories are mostly presented from the view of the returnees, from the immigrants, but they do not talk about the reception and appreciation of their experience of their social remittances in Lithuania. However, as research of my colleagues, of my own previous research shows, it still can be a problematic aspect, that what immigrants bring, it's not accepted. And very recently, there was a story, an article publishing results of a research of a public opinion survey of employers that told that a lot of employers don't want to hire remigrants because they are afraid that remigrants will expect special conditions. So what I'm missing in the story is you see the part of the returnee, of the immigrant, but they don't discuss how it is accepted. So there is still something to miss from the media. So to wrap up the role of the media, they can play this role of encouraging return migration by showing the acceptance and appreciation of immigration in the country, but also we miss the discussion of reception. And now to turn to the immigrant social media. They have different news sites to mass media. Social media of immigrants are important, not because of representation of return migration, but because of direct interactions between immigrants, people thinking about return, also returned migrants. I found almost no information related to social remittances in the social media, but I got some insights how they can be important for return migration. So an overview of immigrant, what I mean by social media, these are mostly Facebook groups that include people living in immigration, and a review of such Facebook groups revealed an abundance of Facebook groups for Lithuanian immigrants, for people living abroad. For example, we took 8 countries with the highest number of immigrants from Lithuania, and we found about 30 Facebook groups. And there must be much more because there are some groups for only particular regions in countries, or for people with particular interests like UK housewives, for example, and etc. And some of them are pretty large, like the largest group over 50,000 of members.
Laima, I'm sorry, your microphone is scratching. We could not hear. It seems that someone is touching the microphone. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do we find in these Facebook groups? Overview of these groups show that immigrant Facebook groups mostly function as a space of mutual exchange of practical information. So there's a lot of practical information, advice, and support. For example, advice on documents, procedures, institutions regarding living in the host country. Also regarding cultural customs in the country. COVID and regulations relating to travel in the COVID situation, a lot of this. Exchanges of information and advice on everyday matters, market exchanges, special topics in women's groups, for example, London Moms, London Mamytes, or Britannicas. These are groups for women particularly. So they include a lot of women's talking, mothering things, etc., and entertainment, sharing of jokes and like that. So these are dominating topics, and very occasionally there are more direct discussions on some political things or topics related to immigration. A very special case of immigrant social media is Facebook group Ex-Immigrante, which specifically includes Lithuanians that have come back to Lithuania or are thinking about coming back. So now, how does it relate to return migration? What is possible? What is the possible role of this group? So first of all, we can talk about facilitation of return and reintegration into home country. And Ex-Immigrante group is particularly important in this respect. So I can say it performs two roles. The first is related to motivation of return, because some groups, some posts in this group, also in other groups, are written by immigrants who are considering coming back, and they're asking, how do you feel when you came back? Was it difficult to find a job? How was with the integration of kids in the school and questions like that? And positive answers, and I must say that particularly the Ex-Immigrante group is dominating by positive answers, which is officially declared policy of this group. There are a lot of positive answers, and we can say that it encourages return. It gives encouragement. And secondly, it facilitates return by giving advice on practical matters, which makes the return easier. For example, which carrier to choose, how to handle mortgages, how to look for a job, how to fix taxes, and things like that. And opinions on some immigrants testify that the group is really performing this role of encouragement. And the last point, because they see my time is running out, what about other immigrants, immigrant groups who seemingly only share practical advice and jokes and casual communication? Well, I would say they are indirectly important for return and social remittances, since they support within diasporic ties and links with the culture of the home country. Because what we see in this group, we see that people, first of all, turn to this group as the first point of address whenever they need advice on anything. It's a sort of comfort zone where I can chat in my own language, get advice from people with a similar background who can explain me things and like this. So there is a lot of communication going on within diaspora. And also there is a lot of contexts which explicitly address elements of home culture, Lithuanian culture. So about Lithuanian foods, Lithuanian kind of celebrations, where to go mushroom picking in UK, where to buy Lithuanian candies and things like that. So they invoke a sense of nostalgia for Lithuanian culture. So, and I think it's only a hypothesis because we didn't do a direct research on the role of these groups, but I believe they are important because it is believed that maintaining connection with within diaspora and with the home country makes the return more likely. It helps to preserve the ties with the home country. So that were my points, and I will be happy to discuss if someone will be interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Laima, very much. To be honest, when living here in Lithuania and exploring this topic of diaspora, I recognize that a lot of Lithuanians who had never faced the immigration themselves or don't really think about this topic, they consider global Lithuanians or immigrants or as like a one group of people, right? So, and we as you, and I could be saying a little bit myself too, who had been exploring this field know that it's not true. The diaspora is very versatile. And so therefore, I would like you to one more remind us which group we are talking here about in the research. Which group did you focus on, so that we are not expanding it further, like just stay on this group? Can you remind us again?
I was rushing the presentation, so sorry I didn't mention that. There was this ex-Immigrant group as a special case. From groups abroad, I was observing for a longer time one Norwegian group and these women groups.
But I'm meaning like the whole research that was focused on people who had emigrated after 90s, have a high education, right? And they are either came back to live in Lithuania or still live abroad, right? Am I correct? This is the focus of the whole research.
You mean the whole project or now?
Yes, the whole project.
The whole project. Ingrida, you wanna say?
I can say yes. Yes, you're very right, and really we concentrated on this part of remittances.
Okay, so that's clear. Thank you again, Laima, and thank you, Ingrida. You can now switch off your cameras, and I will invite 3 more people on stage to switch the cameras on, and we're gonna have a short discussion and also invite the audiences to join. The first participant of the discussion is Dr. Kaidra Pojunas from University of Essex. She actually participated doing this research as well, but she's going to give a little bit of different angle into this research. Then Dr. Rimvydas Baltaduonis, who is the co-founder of Pilietybė LT. But not only that, he's in the diaspora field, he's much more also the mastermind, let's say, behind the voting initiative Mūsų metas dabar, and many other initiatives. And also he's associate professor at Gettysburg College in USA. Hi, Rimvydas.
Hello.
Hi. And we have another discussion participant who is Kaidra Pojunas. She's active member of Lithuanian Youth Organization, or even I'm sure that you have some title there as well. And she's also senior engagement advisor at Ontario Digital Service, and from Canada. Kaidra is from Canada, and the reason I invited Kaidra because hi Kaidra, by the way, say hi to everyone. And
Labas.
The reason
Bonjour, because 2 official languages in Canada.
Okay. So the reason I invited Kaidra is that for me, she is a very inspiring example of a person who was not born in Lithuania, who had never been to Lithuania, but she's already like a lot participating not only in diasporic activities, but also in practical activities in Lithuania, like GovTech and so on, Hack the Crisis and so on. And also Kaidra is planning to move to Lithuania in some near future. So that your perspective is going to be very interesting. So the goal of this discussion is going to be how to move from what we heard here in the presentations. How can we apply those insights for action, right? Here we have people of action. So before we move, I would like Kaidra Pojunas to give us a little bit insights of how this research relate to other diasporic researchers that you had been conducting in Eastern Europe and also Lithuania and Poland, as I know you had been researching a lot, and also your interesting remarks about what actually those remigrants are and what are the returnees are when we talk about what do we mean. So Violeta.
Thank you, Aušra. Hello, everyone, once again. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be here in this event. Very interesting. Thank you for my fantastic colleagues for really rich presentations. So we observe that Lithuania is investing heavily in the development of innovative ways to attract Lithuanians back, especially those who are highly skilled. And this makes obviously a lot of sense given the recent population decline in the country. By contrast, for example, this is not a priority of any kind for our Polish neighbors. They do not even have a kind of explicit return migration policy as such, and they do not really encourage returns at all. Main thing that they have is a website that basically signposts returnees who come back to Poland and need to use various institutions in the kind of settling down process. And this is quite understandable, I imagine, because the Polish nation is not really at any risk at all, given the 40 million population in Poland and 20 million or so abroad. Can I just check that you can hear me okay? Yep, okay.
Yes, we can hear you perfect.
Brilliant. Sorry, one sec. Yeah. In Lithuania, however, it's a completely different story. Lithuania has a lot to lose if it does not engage with diaspora and does not encourage returns. So the presentations that we have just heard made it very clear that actually returnees have a lot to give to their country. But the question remains, is the country ready to welcome them home and appreciate what they are bringing? So in this context, I would like to focus my comments a little bit around three aspects. And one of them has been kind of intermittently mentioned here, and it's about facilitating a sense of one community. So we talk a lot about emigrants and immigrants and returnees and remigrants and non-migrants, but actually they are all one big transnational community. They all live in one big transnational field. However global we are and however transnational, actually, we all live in the context of nations and national borders. So for Lithuanian context, this means that it includes both those Lithuanians who live in Lithuania and those actually who live elsewhere. The Lithuanian media, as Laima has just briefly described, Lithuanian media discourse on migration has become more positive recently. But there is still a strong divide felt between migrants and those who never left. Returnees are still seen as exotic somehow, us versus them. And this is felt among returnees too, who come back transformed by their migration experiences, just to find that actually meanwhile their home country and their own people have changed too. So the difficulties to understand each other, to tolerate differences in views and values that those who return bring back home, they lead returnees to form their own organizations and seek moral support in the circle of other returnees, so people similar to themselves. Although initially they are very determined to act and build and create and spread tolerance and speak loudly and clearly, with time, returnees' confidence and agency might actually diminish if it's not sustained and supported. So how do we bring together the mobile and non-mobile parts of the nation and make them feel part of actually the same imagined community? What can media do more to help this project? And what can institutions do, for example, maybe within municipalities? Why there are no returnees organizations in Poland, for example? Why there is no need for them? Poland, as I mentioned before, does not have elaborate strategies to attract return migrants. Their strategy instead is focused on supporting Polonia or Polish diaspora where they are. So Polish diaspora has always been a very important part of the Polish national narrative and identity. So how well does Lithuanian national discourse embed the Lithuanian diaspora? Do Lithuanian schools teach about Lithuanians abroad? Do those who live settled lives in Lithuania know about the contribution of those who left Lithuania? Such educational initiatives are starting to spring up with, for example, the World Lithuanian University and classes on diaspora offered for university students. But how is this discourse of one nation embedded into everyday narratives of the general population, and what can we do to make it stronger? My second point is about granting special attention to second and subsequent generations of Lithuanians abroad, like Kaidra. So our project and previous projects that I have worked on, they have showed that actually those who left and spent years abroad, developing as persons, as citizens, as professionals, they return with a lot of capital that has the potential to transform social and economic and political spheres of life and make them better and more attractive for everyone, basically, for those who live in Lithuania, for those who return, and for other nationals who come and live here. But the human potential of children who were born abroad to Lithuanians, or children, or those who left Lithuania as children and spent their young formative years abroad, grew up as part of the democratic society with strong liberal values and civic values and appreciation for diversity. So the potential of this group of individuals is actually mind-blowing. We heard about confidence and agency that drives returnees to make a change in their home country. The power to make that change is even stronger with subsequent generations of returnees, or people who we call, in the kind of academic circle, we call them world citizens, because they're amazingly flexible, they're adjustable, they basically actively shape the environment around them. They aim to make an impact through transferring public social remittances. So they don't focus just on small kind of private circles around them. They aim for really wide public impact. Very often they come well prepared and they are successful at gaining socially influential managerial positions. But in order to ensure that they want to contribute and return, they have to have maintained a really strong emotional bond with their parents or their country, and they have to want to return. So Saturday schools, for example, are useful here, but this is only part of the story. Helping parents to understand the importance of passing on the cultural and linguistic values onto their children is another element to it. So why Poland does not, for example, debate double citizenship? Because it's not an issue for them. But it is a huge issue for Lithuanians abroad. And it has the potential to damage their relationship with their home country. Polish parents do not struggle to teach Polish to their children in the UK because they take it for granted. It's a natural part of their identity. But what can we do to support positive national identity formation in subsequent generations of Lithuanians? How can we support the relationship between Lithuania and those of Lithuanian descent? So that's my second point. And my third point is around helping to return and stay. So we know from the current project, also from other projects on return migration, that return is not necessarily a finite station migration. We know that most people return for emotional reasons, such as attachment to their homeland and their families. We also know that most of those who leave again after returning do so for economic reasons, which are not just about pay, but also about employment relations, for example. In a different study that we recently conducted on Polish and Lithuanian returnees as part of the DAINA funding opportunity, we found that Lithuanians, compared to Poles, they are more likely to leave again, for example. And we are speaking here about highly skilled Lithuanians. And this is largely among professionals who build their careers abroad, who maintain contacts and links with the migration country that they left in order to return to Lithuania. So why is that? Is it limited to career opportunities in a small country that they sometimes call a sandbox of Europe? Or is it pay? Is it the fact that they do not feel welcome and recognized, despite the fact that they bring a lot of human capital and are motivated to make an impact? We also know that the second emigration is usually homecoming for them. So homecoming to the country of migration because they have tried to go home and they failed, so they don't try again. So now they're determined to build their home elsewhere, not in their home country. Our research shows that migration and return decisions are always negotiated in the context of a variety of personal and family and professional decisions. My research with other Polish and Lithuanian colleagues suggests that countries like Lithuania should also ensure that they have policies directed at retaining returnees. So not only attracting them back, but also retaining them by assisting in their successful reintegration after return. Alternatively, if they leave, the policies need to be in place to keep them engaged and involved in their country's affairs. And the best way to do that is by listening to migrants, listening to returnees and those who are considering return through, for example, engaging with groups such as Ex-Immigrant. Thank you very much.
Violeta, very good questions, and not to mention the beautiful accent. I was listening, it was amazing. Thank you, Violeta, very much. And there were so many points that it's kind of even difficult to grasp one and lead one nail. I think that all those 3 points could be a totally different conference already on each of those points that you mentioned. So we're going to move to Rimvydas, and Rimvydai, I remember you said to me once that all that you had learned about civic participation and civic engagement and activity, how to do the civic movements, was through the organization in the United States. Can I mention that? Yes,
absolutely,
the LGBTQ community civic movement, right? So, and the skills that you had learned there, you transferred those skills and those practices and this know-how you transferred to Lithuanian civic, building a Lithuanian civic movement. So actually, you are the example of what Vytis was previously mentioning about the transfer of know-how and transfer of this civic participation. So can you reflect a little bit from what you had heard here, what do you think you will use for your future initiatives?
Thank you, Aushra. And yeah, I haven't discussed publicly my transfer of knowledge that I gained through participation in human rights, LGBTQ rights movement in the United States to Lithuania. So this might be a good opportunity to do that. Connection with Lithuania, of course, for most immigrants is very strong. It's that second step to continue engage with Lithuania, to be connected with Lithuania and give back, as Vytis described, is not so common. It's less common. So when I listen to this, to me, it's clear that the remigration is a super powerful tool to bring the knowledge, the skills, the experience back to Lithuania. In fact, it might be very critical link between immigrants and the Lithuanians living in Lithuania to make that potential work, right? I remember from our civic engagement campaign, Mūsų metas dabar, that tried to energize the citizens all over the world to participate in the elections. how I got scared when I found out that some of our key people in the team were moving back to Lithuania, because I was like, well, they're returning, so they won't be feeling that they are part of this global community, part of the migrants community, so they won't care about it as much. Turns out those people were such a valuable asset to us because they connected us to the information, to the knowledge, to the institutions. And we continue to remain connected to them and build additional initiatives after that. So that worked very, very well. And I think the key thing of all this is that diversity of our Lithuanians abroad is very wide. And we learn how to live in the diverse societies. And Lithuania, after regaining independence and becoming part of the global community, needs to learn how to live in diverse societies. And it's not just Lithuanians in Lithuania, Lithuanians abroad. In fact, when Lithuanians abroad try to come together and say like, well, let's do something together, right? Even when it comes to elections and we form a campaign, everyone is speaking from their own country's perspective. Norwegians have this policies about dual citizenship, Canada has another, United States has its own views, after Brexit, UK, Lithuanians have another, and everyone's like, we should do this, right? We need to learn how to speak amongst ourselves and discuss. And that's the conversation that builds our skills to understand each other, who initially we think like we all the same, we all Lithuanians, we should think alike. We don't, right? But then when we come back to Lithuania for longer or even for shorter periods, for Christmas or summer breaks, those skills transfer. And I really like to hear that to be confirmed in studies like this, because those who tap into this energy that migrating Lithuanians have, we kind of feel that we try to energize that force, but it's great to see that it's confirmed in more sort of systemic interviews, and especially with the re-immigrants to Lithuania who feel that they do need support. They need to be heard, because it's a little bit different type of remittances. Social remittances is not just, about money, or which is clear, like the more you have, the better it is, right? You come back to Lithuania, you start your own business, you generate profit, and then you feel reaffirmed, right? You know that it's in your pocket. Social remittances is a bit different. You come back and you try to do something through NGO, through initiatives, and you get a pushback. And then it's usually as a trade-off of time that you could be making money, right? And unlike some of the businesses that actually then end up selling services and goods abroad where the value added is very high, with social remittances, you have to sell your value at home where that value is not appreciated that much. So social remittances needs to have extra attention from government, from communities, appreciating the value that it brings.
Rimvydas, we're heading into dual citizenship referendum. And of course, you will be, I'm sure, you will be one of the leading persons for campaigning for this dual citizenship referendum. And of course, we all understand that that for this referendum to happen, we will need to be this one community, or one community, as Violeta was mentioning, both those who live abroad and those who live in Lithuania. So this question, how do we make the immigrants and let's say the people living in Lithuania, how do we make them feel as one rather than separated? Did you get any ideas, maybe, or insights from what you've heard?
So first of all, it's very good news that the migration, re-immigration is moving from yellow pages to white pages, to the news, that it's not scandal driven, that it's more about life, about the value that we as Lithuanians all over the world can create for ourselves, for our communities, for the country. And so telling those stories is super important for changing our understanding what we are together. By the way, not all countries and not all nations have that drive to stay together and contribute. So Lithuania should be very fortunate, and our nation should feel really ahead in trying to take advantage of this. So that's first thing. The second thing, we do apparently need to really try to mobilize the immigrants community in Lithuania. That's not been done so far to the extent that at least I am aware of. We try to mobilize the diaspora abroad that holds citizenship or even stays connected to Lithuania to vote, to participate, to engage. We have not worked as closely with the re-immigrant community in Lithuania, and it turns out that studies shows that they can be a powerful force changing Lithuanians' opinions. So that's one step that needs to be done, absolutely. And in our efforts, I think we'll be targeting that group more, including through our information portal Pilietybė.lt, which is trying to create an informational platform for everyone to get the news that's correct in the community building.
Okay. Thank you, Embed. And I'm moving to Kaidra. We're a little bit behind the schedule. I can see but I hope that participants will forgive us because we started the event a bit later, and it seems some points haven't been discussed. So Kaidra, your story of a person who is I already mentioned, who had never been to Lithuania, who was not born in Lithuania. You speak Lithuanian, but and you are planning to already, like before the pandemics, you already started planning to come back to Lithuania, and ever since you started integrating yourself into life of Lithuania. So how is it going? Like, how is it going to do that from Canada? What are your experiences?
Yeah, for sure. I won't take up a lot of space because I think everything truly that's been shared has really been resonating with me. But yeah, I just wanted to say again, labas, tikrai ačiū už pakvietimą. I did just want to say some Lithuanian because yes, I'm third generation, but I do think language is also a really important linkage. Whether or not it dominates every group, it's still important to have some Lithuanian sprinkled in. Yeah, I really just wanted to say that I think the pandemic was an accelerator for me to actually think about Lithuania in a very real way. Global Lithuania meetings were often limited to those who were in Vilnius. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for virtual cross-border participation, remote work, remote collaboration. It just really wasn't normalized. And I think for me, a turning point was the hackathon, the Hack the Crisis moment. I saw it advertised on LinkedIn and it was open to anyone and everyone. So the time zone was a little awkward for me. I was up at like 3 a.m, but that's okay. What else were we doing during the peak pandemic days? And it really was an opportunity not just to meet Lithuanians, in Lithuania and other internationals, because I've always been a part of the Pasaulio Lietuvių Sąjunga. That's actually how my parents met. So I have a very strong emotional connection to the organization. And, I have a musical background, so I sing and I've traveled with Lithuanian choirs. But what was so interesting about this event was it linked professional Lithuanians. And I've always wanted to find a connection beyond cultural ties and really be able to bring my passion for digital governance, and thinking about what is Lithuania doing? We talk about Estonia and we talk about Estonia in the context of digital voting, but what's Lithuania doing? Same time, same cultural considerations. How is it different? How is it similar? So this was an opportunity for me to join and to make a lot of connections under a very short period of time, a lot of meaningful connections. And I think it's really propelled me to think about, just taking advantage of this really unique point in history and saying, well, what if I did go to Lithuania for a year? So to Violetta's point, I'm not interested in staying in the long term. I have a very clear box. I'll be taking a leave of absence from my job. And yes, I am planning it now because I'm also a planner. I've been planning this for the last year, actually. But some of the ways I've been planning is through social media, is through joining global Lithuanian leaders, being an active participant in working groups and really paying attention to new emerging networks like Qualitative. Lots of respect to organizations that have been born during this time period that tries to go beyond formal networks and tries to bring and holds more space for other perspectives and does things in both formal and informal ways. I think it's really important to embrace the informality of our diaspora groups as well. We have formal institutions in Canada, for example, that have been around for decades and decades, but then there's also Facebook groups that are, that they're moderated by informal groups, and they're also very valuable, and they're also really rich resources. And so I think the question that I want to leave this group is community building and community work is work. Regardless of who does it, it's work. It should be valued. It should be invested in. And I know that we have some politicians here, and so I hope I just make that message clear too, that it's not just government's work. It's not just these like Qualitative groups that do it on the side of their desk. It's work. So how can we more intentionally invest in it and fund it? And I think also this idea of world citizenship, and I really love Violetta's point about, diversity and a lot of groups being born in a different society, but wanting to come back to Lithuania and bringing sort of this lens of diversity. And then to Dimi, this experience about his experience in the LGBT group organizing. And I think for me too, I am trying to translate a lot of my personal work in civic tech. And so I'm active in civic tech. It's a global, movement organization, this idea of building technology with users from the beginning. And a lot of the ways that these community spaces are organized, I bring that to the work I do with Pasaulio Disciplininė Sąjunga. I do bring that into the work I do with the Kanados Lietuvių Bendruomenė, thinking about hosting meetings, making them open, allowing people to do work when it suits them, right? There's this real impetus on doing things in real time and making sure in the meeting, and if you miss a meeting, you're no longer a part of the decision. And it's like, how can we decentralize it? How can we meet people where they are? How can we create social platforms that engage youth? That's a huge consideration in Canada right now, that most of our institutions and Lithuanian-owned banks and Lithuanian-owned halls are run by people over the age of 50. And I'm still in my 20s and I'm concerned, for my future, for my peers' futures. So I think it's also thinking about youth and thinking about how can we bring them to the table and meet them where they're at. So I just want to summarize by saying community building is work, really leaning to this idea of world citizenship, and finally meeting people where they're at and thinking about youth. Ačiū.
Also, Kaidra, we've talked about the importance of peer-to-peer experience sharing in terms of returning or moving to live in Lithuania. So, can you shortly just share your insight?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I want to commend a lot of government programs like Kurk Lietuva as an example. This idea of bringing like a mentorship program into existence. But the challenge is that you need a citizenship, and I don't have a citizenship. And so I think too, when we think about re-immigration and social remittances, what about those who don't have the bureaucracy on their side, all that paperwork. I think simplifying things, I think it is government's role to simplify processes and do user research. Like, have you actually tested these websites with people who will be using these websites? Because it's very obvious you have not. And I think, I try to bring that lens perspective to our Lithuanian Canadian embassy, like when I can, trying to edit the English copy so that it actually makes sense. People wouldn't put these words, just as when I write in Lithuanian, it's horrible. So I think it ties into mentorship too, because when you're building these mentorship systems, you also have to think about those using the system. To build a mentorship system without thinking about how it'll be used, total waste of time. With a pilot group, think about groups that are maybe in their 30s, their 40s, right? So groups that are established and have a bit more of a professional, history that they can bring, but then also thinking about how we can link these new professionals or younger mid-professionals to those in Lithuania and on a routine basis, have a monthly check-in. I'm really inspired by Women Go Tech. This is a professional tech network and Big Brother LT. So how can we create some of those systems, but make them more targeted for those returning to Lithuania? Because I do, again, going back to Violetta's point, it's really about also creating like a social, emotional community that people want to enjoy. People want to enjoy the experience of going back to Lithuania. And if it's painful, if it's jarring, if it's stressful, why would anyone do it, right? So it's thinking about it from a user perspective, putting the user in front and being able to identify that user and then doing the research, right? And so I think this talk really brings that to the forefront.
Well, I hope that your insights and experience will be very valuable when you finally move here as well. Thank you, Kaidra. Do you allow me to pick up a couple of questions or comments from the audience? Do we have anyone? Can you raise hands? Okay, so we have a very quiet audience. I was hoping there's going to be like lots of hands. So if we're having a quiet audience and nobody has to ask or share anything, I will then, since we are off our time, I will use my authority as a moderator and announce this event finished. Thank you everyone who participated in talking about the remuneration and talking about reaffirmation of diaspora. I want to remind again that we have Global Lithuanian Awards on December 29th. It's going to be happening in St. Catherine's Church, and all the money that will be raised during this event through your tickets will be donated to Global Lithuanian leaders, non-governmental and non-profit organizations to do this work of what we were talking about, engaging diaspora professionals for society growth and development in Lithuania. Thank you very much. And one more thing is that we will be sending to all who participated and registered a link to a recording of this event, and also any publicly available information about the research, more detailed information about the research, so you can go deeper into that and explore separately. So thank you everyone who participated, and thanks for our discussants and researchers.
Super interesting. Thank you again.